It was a lovely summer afternoon when Molly and Sam went for a sail with their Uncle Jack. They had taken a basket with plenty of supper, for they were going for such a long sail that they could not get home before 9 o'clock. It would be a bright moonlight night, however, and the boat was a safe one. Off they went, and waving their hands to Mamma as long as they could see her, they sailed away and away. "Now, children," said their uncle, "let us go straight out to the open ocean. We will sail as fast as we can till 5 o'clock, and then we will turn about and come home." With the children's help, and they were a great help, he spread all sail, and away flew the dragonfly over the water. At first they saw a great many boats like their own, and even smaller, then fewer and fewer, until at last only one or two stately ships were to be seen. Then they met a big ocean steamer plowing the water, throwing the white waves to right and left. When the people on board saw the little sailboat bobbing up and down on the water, they waved their handkerchiefs at Uncle Jack and the two children, who took off their hats in return. When it was 5 o'clock and time to turn about for home, the wind suddenly died out, and the unfilled sail flapped uselessly at the mast. It began to grow dark, too, while just over their heads they saw a big black cloud, which looked most threatening. Fearing that a thunderstorm was coming and realizing their danger, Uncle Jack sprang to take in sail. But he was already too late, for the storm was upon them. The cloud above suddenly burst, a torrent of rain descended, and the wind blew furiously. Bidding the two children lie down in the bottom of the boat and keep perfectly quiet, Uncle Jack worked frantically with the big sail, and at last succeeded in taking it in. As soon as the sail was down, the boat, which had been rolling frightfully, righted itself somewhat, and poor Uncle Jack and the two trembling children knew that their present danger was over. And now the dragonfly raced madly on, blown by the furious gale, Uncle Jack keeping her as steady as possible and aiming for he knew not where. The sky was as black as night, and the howling of the wind in the rigging was dreadful. For 15 minutes this storm continued. Then the sky began to lighten a bit, the wind died gradually out, and the sun shone on them again, for it had been only a summer storm, and though violent, did not last long. And now, to their utter amazement, they saw directly before them an island, which was quite unknown, even to Uncle Jack, who had sailed in these waters for years. Between them and the island, however, and standing like sentinels on guard, was a reef of angry-looking rocks, against which the breakers were dashing with tremendous force. "We must keep away from them," said Uncle Jack, when to his horror he found that a very strong current was carrying the boat directly upon them. In vain did he try to turn it, while the children sat silently, with white faces, clasping each other's hands, and expecting every moment to be dashed to pieces. "If we can but reach the quiet water beyond," thought Uncle Jack, "we shall be all right." And to his unutterable relief, the waves, instead of dashing them against the cruel rocks, carried them right between two tall ones into the still water. But when the boat got there, it immediately turned upside down, breaking the mast and throwing them and everything else out. Fortunately, being near the shore, the water was not more than 2 feet deep, so the spill did not injure them in any way except to give them a ducking. Taking the rope which was on the bow of the dragonfly, they all waded ashore, and Uncle Jack fastened the rope to the stump of a tree. "Now, come, children," said he. let us look about. There may be people on this island who will help us. We must dry our clothes and mend our boat before we can go home." "Uncle," said Sam, "what shall we do if there are no people here?" "Well, in that case, we will make a fire ourselves. I have matches in my pocket, and there seems to be plenty of wood. But first, let us make sure that we are on a desert island." So they turned from the water and walked on, when, to their amazement, they saw coming toward them 3 most astonishing figures: a very old man and 2 children, a boy and a girl about the age of Sam and Molly. There was nothing very remarkable about this, but can you believe me when I tell you that all 3 were walking on their hands, while their feet stuck straight up in the air? Each had a pair of brushes, like blacking brushes, their hands being thrust through the straps at the back, and on these they walked, to protect their hands from the rough stones. But when they came near, each jumped quickly on his feet, and taking off one brush, shook hands heartily with the strangers, bidding them welcome to the Upside-Down Island. "You're very fortunate not to get drowned," said the old man. "People who are bold enough to try to come to this island are dashed first against those rocks and then turned upside down." "But we did not try to come," said Molly. "The waves brought us." "Ah," said the old man, "that is probably why you escaped. The rocks guard us and do not let inquisitive people land. However, as the waves have brought you in spite of yourselves, you are heartily welcome. But you are wet. Come to my house, dry your clothes, and have dinner." So saying, the 3 thrust their hands into their brush straps, and, walking as before, led the way to the village. Of course, there could be no conversation while these strange people were in this ridiculous position, so that Uncle Jack and the 2 children had ample time to look about them. And many strange things they saw: fields carefully cultivated, and trees that looked like our trees, but which bore the strangest fruit you can imagine. In a field at a little distance, they saw what looked like bean poles, which, however, were waving back and forth. When they got nearer, they found they were not poles at all, but the legs of a herd of cows, the cows themselves lying flat on their backs, with their legs straight up in the air, and turning their heads over occasionally to get a nibble at the rich green grass. When Uncle Jack and the children reached the village, they found that everyone there was walking in the same absurd way as the 3 who had met them. They could not help asking why this was done. "Dry your clothes first," said the old man, "and have your dinner with us, and then I will tell you all about us Upsidedownians. Dinner will be ready before long. See, there are my 2 grandsons picking the potatoes and digging the apples." And Uncle Jack and the 2 children actually did see them doing this very thing. One of the boys was picking potatoes from a tree, while the other was digging rosy-cheeked apples from the brown earth. They could scarcely wait to be told the meaning of all this. After their clothes had been thoroughly dried, they were called to dinner, and were relieved to find that the Upsidedownians sat at the table as they themselves did, keeping their feet down on the ground. The dinner itself was a queer affair, although the food was excellent and well cooked. First, they were given candied fruit and a dish of the ripe red apples they saw dug from the ground. Then they had fish and some of the potatoes which they had seen picked from the trees. And lastly, some soup made from the roots of a plant which grew on the island. "You are surprised," said the old man. that we serve our soup last. But the reason is simple. You see, standing as we Upsidedownians do so much of the time with our heads down, our stomachs get, after a while, turned topsy-turvy, so that we are obliged to begin with the dessert and end with the soup, in order that our dinner may be properly digested." And Uncle Jack said, "I see," for he really was not quite sure whether he himself was standing on his head or his heels. "But why?" he asked. "Do you walk on your hands at all?" "I will tell you," said the old man. "This, then, is the history of our people. Our great-great-great-grandparents were people who lived in a country far from here. They were not satisfied there. They thought everything was wrong and longed to go to some faraway land where they could make a new world with everything their own way. They went off in a big ship and sailed for a year and a day, but every land they came to had people on it, all doing just as in the land which they had left. At last, one day, our island was reached, and sailing around and around it, they could see no house, no man, woman, nor child, and they said, 'Here we will land, here we will live, where we can have everything our own way.' But when they tried to land, the rocks seized their boats and turned them upside down, spilling them all out into the water. Fortunately, it happened to be a calm day, when the water was like glass. And though with much difficulty, they all managed to get safely to land. Here they lived, and here their children and great-great-great-grandchildren have lived ever since. We try hard to do everything quite differently from the way they do in the land our grandparents came from." "I think you have succeeded admirably," said Uncle Jack heartily. "You do? Ah, well, we do our best. We do our best." And the old man rubbed his hands together delightedly. "Of course, it was hard for us to learn to walk on our hands, and hard, too, to make potatoes grow on trees and apples in the earth, but we succeeded at last," he said triumphantly. "Yes, you have indeed succeeded," said Uncle Jack. "But will you tell me, why is your way better than the old?" "Because it is our way," said the old man, and to this Uncle Jack could find no possible answer. "Our power and influence are great. Our will here is law, and all who approach our island must obey that law. Look up, stranger. Watch that gull." Looking up, Uncle Jack and the children saw a huge gull flying lazily toward the island, his white wings spread and glistening in the bright sunlight. He went in the ordinary way till he was directly over them, when he immediately turned and flew upside down till he found himself once more beyond the island and over the water, when he again turned and flew like a common, everyday gull. "Astonishing!" said Uncle Jack and the children. "Same with the fishes, whose home is near the island," said Smith Mister, for that they found was the old gentleman's name. "And speaking of fishes, reminds me of your boat. I suppose you will want to have us help you mend and put it in proper condition again for your homeward voyage. We will do so tomorrow, and you will, I hope, spend tonight with us. There will be plenty of room for you all on my roof." "On the roof?" cried Uncle Jack, Sam, and Molly together. Is it possible that you Upsidedownians sleep on the roofs of your houses?" "Certainly we do," said Smith Mister. "We could not sleep as they do in the land where our great-great-great-grandfathers, and also our great-great-great-grandmothers came from." "I think we will not spend the night with you," said Uncle Jack hastily. "But we will be greatly obliged to you, Smith Mister, if you will give us help in mending our boat." "Gladly," said the old man, and followed by all the village people clattering over the rocks on their brushes, and with feet held high and straight in the air, they walked to the shore. Pulling in the boat by the rope, they all worked hard to get it in condition, and were so kind and helpful that everything was done in less than half an hour. Then, when they were about to start, a boy came from the village, balancing on his feet a basket of the tree potatoes and earth apples, which he gave to them. A glass of milk also was given to each of the children. They were astonished to see all the cream settled at the bottom of the glass. "When cows feed, lying on their backs," said Smith Mister, "the cream always falls to the bottom of the milk." As they got into their boat, he said, "You may tell your friends about us, that they may wonder, but never let them know where this island is. Promise me." And Uncle Jack, Molly, and Sam promised, and thanking them all for their kindness, the boat was pushed off. They had great difficulty in keeping it upright, although the water was perfectly calm. Twice before reaching the rocks it was almost upset, and the third time would have been, had not the kind-hearted Upsidedownians jumped into the water and held it. This was, of course, difficult for them to do, as they had, while in the water, to stand on their tender feet. But they at last reached the rocks, and then, all pushing together, out between the two high ones shot the dragonfly, and the danger was over. Shouting goodbye and waving their hats to the crowd of Upsidedownians, who stood on the shore with heads down, clapping their feet frantically together, the dragonfly sailed home and reached there at just 9 o'clock.